And welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords, everybody. This is the historical action and adventure podcast, and my name is Matthew Harffy.
And my name is Justin Hill.
And it's lovely to see you, Justin. How are you doing?
Yeah, it was very good. I've gone straight from delivering the first draft of one novel to a kind of unfinished novel that I last looked at in September last year.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't realize actually quite how close to finished it was. So I kind of feel
This is your modern day thriller, or whatever
my
it is.
modern thriller. And I feel now I'm on the kind of flywheel of finishing a novel. Yesterday, I had my agent emailing me saying, what's the pitch for the, London Book Fair in April? And, so I'm sending him a chunk so he can. It's very hard to describe your own book to someone.
It is. It's interesting because I'm just going through something similar. And now you mentioned the book fair. Actually, I haven't got an agent, as you know, but I've got obviously an editor in the publishers, and he's suddenly been on my case in the last couple of weeks. It's been like, have you got a synopsis for the Roman novel? Have you got this, that, and the other? What's the title? Have you got some ideas for title? So this has been suddenly, I think I mentioned the last time we recorded about the title, but suddenly, it's synopsis and it's this, that, and the other. It says, I'm going to take this to the marketing team. Could it be the first one in the series? It's all suddenly, and I guess it is all gearing up for that London Book Fair, which...
Yeah, it's kind of like a flywheel.
For the British book industry, that's the big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where they go and try to sell all the rights and they try to sort of let people know what's coming and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I said I would send him a large chunk at the beginning of the book. So I think you can sell something much more coherently if you be much more excited about it if he has a kind of a much better idea. So Ellie's, I've got my first reader onto the case. Ellie's reading it. And loving
you said I saw you mentioned on your social media that she really enjoyed it and that she's enjoying what she's read so far. So that's really good news.
Yeah, and she's about 20,000 words in, so she's about a quarter of the way through, and I don't think there's many lulls yet. It's fast paced. I always knew the beginning was good.
Yeah, that's good.
It's just getting the ending right.
That's really good.
But I think as you get each bit in, well, the way I write, I get each section in place, and set, then the ending kind of writes itself.
It definitely clicks more into place when I definitely find the middle of the book the most difficult. It's the ending. Once you get through that middle, the ending does tend to sort of, from my, it does tend to speed along, and you feel like you're sort of, it's almost like you're pushing uphill the whole time, and then you get to the top. It's somewhere like the 2/3 of the way into the novel, and that last third is like the downhill slalom, and you're sort of dodging things and trying to remember what you've written before and sort of get through to the end.
I've just got through that kind of soggy middle. I've done a lot of cutting. I took some scenes that I'd cut last July and I put them back in, and that was really helpful. And then I think I'm going to be kind of hopefully finish the novel by the end of the month, which is really exciting.
Well, I'm hoping that I'll finish this first draft of the Roman novel by the end of the month as well. So I'm suddenly feel like I'm more on track than I thought I was. I felt a couple of weeks ago, I felt quite behind schedule, I felt quite lost, whatever. But again, you said your wife is like your first reader. I debated it a lot with my wife and sort of told her I basically told her the story. And in doing that, she managed to sort of help me unclog certain bits of the narrative and help me sort of string together the last few chapters in my mind.
You look very positive on social media. I kind of follow your daily writing, achievements. So where's that now? You're about 40,000 words before?
So I'm at 85,000 words.
Wow.
In now. And so I've probably, as I say, probably another couple of weeks writing.
Yeah.
I think I'm basically into the very final act now of the story. And it's funny that you said you'd sent stuff to your agent. My editor has been asking suddenly for details. I didn't have a really polished synopsis. I have a synopsis that I wrote when I started writing it, which has changed over time. I've done some planning. I've done, using Eon timeline that I use and everything, but it wasn't really for public consumption now. And things have moved quite a lot, since the writing's actually started. So I thought I need to give him something. So like you said, it's much easier for somebody to get excited about it if they read it. And I never normally share anything with anyone until at least I've had a couple of passes myself and sort of polished it up. But I said to him, look, I think he asked for it. He said, like, can you send me something? And I said, okay, well, he said, can you send me just, even if it's just like some bits of like high tension or, moments of the plot, to sort of get an idea of what the story's like. And in the end, I went through, and I think I was like 75,000 words then. And I went through and I just pulled out the chapters that I thought were the best, that would give like a representative idea. But I ended up sending him about 20 something thousand words. So it's almost like a novella length.
Yeah.
But I said there was gaps in it. There's square brackets saying things like, type of food here, or God, or things like that. Just like really, or name of legion or whatever. Just really.
Yeah. What am I doing here?
Yeah, temple. I mean, everything that I don't know that I need to research. And so I said I never normally share stuff like that. So I was a bit worried, but he came back and seemed quite pleased. So, and he hasn't said like, "Oh my God, what the hell are you writing?"
Yeah, what is this drivel?
And then today I spent the day, basically I thought I need to give him a synopsis, actually explaining the beginning, middle, and the end, and what's going on. And so in Scrivener, each chapter you can have like a little summary description, and in one of the views of Scrivener you can look at them as not post-it notes, what do you call them, like index cards on a chalk on a cork board, and you see the little description there. So I went through and I used the dictation software that I'm using now just to talk through the description. So skim the chapter and then just say the character does this, that, and the other, meets so and so, makes love or whatever, and and then I a few lines. And I've done that through the whole book, realized there's over 40 chapters. And then Scrivener has a way of, you can compile just those summaries with a chapter heading. So it's just chapter 1, bang, chapter 2, bang, you got the descriptions. So it's like about 4,000 words in this big synopsis. And I've just sent him that and I said, there you go, warts and all, but it's sort of, hopefully that shows you the structure of the book as it is at the moment. And he hasn't replied yet. So, but yes, wow. It's been a busy few days.
Yeah, so you have really broken the back of it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm really at the final sort of denouement now. It's sort of the rush towards the end. I'm still a little bit. I don't know what's going to happen after the big climactic sort of fight, challenge scene. There needs to be some sort of epilogue to close some threads down. There needs to be that sort of gentle denouement, but there needs to be a bit of I need to understand what's going to happen to certain characters. I haven't really worked those things out, but that can come.
I always find my characters drinking, and usually drinking to come to terms with what's just happened to them.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely there's a bit of that already. The book starts with him being a drunk, so
So you are quite far ahead of schedule, aren't you?
I don't think I'm ahead of schedule. I just think that I felt like I was behind schedule before. So I need to, if I finish the first draft at the end of March, then I'm going away for a week in April, and there's Easter and stuff as well. So I'll probably do some sort of like polish edits in April, get it to some sort of clean state, hopefully by the end of April. Then I've got some things in May as well, like which we should mention to people.
Yeah,
that we've mentioned before, but in fact we skipped the whole thing of telling people, plugging our Patreon and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, so in May, we're going to the Robin of Sherwood Herne's Arrow event in Chepstow on the 23rd and 24th of May. And that's Justin and me going and interviewing. We'll be going there and interviewing people, cast and crew from the amazing television series from the 80s, Robin of Sherwood. And so that's, that we're going to have to do some prep for that. And, but I've got to hand in the book by the end of June. So, it gives me time to do some editing, but I've not got huge amounts of time because we've got quite a few things on. But just a reminder to everybody that's listening, if you're interested in Robin of Sherwood and you want to come and see us, there are still tickets on sale for that. So there are day tickets, I think, and there's also weekend tickets, and it's in a really cool hotel. You don't have to stay in the hotel, but you can go there, and there's all sort of signings that you can get autographs from all the actors and people. And also you can hear us interviewing them, and you can meet us, and you can see, I think there's reenactments, and there's like falconry and archery contests and medieval banquets you can sign up to and all this sort of stuff. So it should be great fun.
Yeah, it should be brilliant. Robin of Sherwood was just one of those seminal series. Funny, my kids watched it I bought the DVDs for them, when they were kids themselves, and they loved it. So it has real kind of staying power. It was such a great series. It was my brother and I. It was kind of compulsory watching. So to meet the cast and crew and all that lot, and of course us,
I mean, wow, the cast. I mean, they're going to be. They're not going to know what to do with themselves when we walk on stage with them.
Because of course Gimli, Rhys Davis, is it? He was in it as well. I'm not sure if he's coming. He may be coming.
No, he's not coming.
Okay.
He's not coming to it because I think he's too big for that now. He's a Lord of the Rings money.
Yeah,
he's
still
an Indiana Jones.
Sean Connery's son, isn't it? He was one of them.
Jason Connery. He's Robert of Huntingdon.
Yeah,
who becomes Robin Hood. Yeah.
So all kinds of great actors. It's going to be a really fun weekend. They'll be fantastic, and of course Matthew and I will be fantastic as well.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. It's going to be great fun. I'm a little bit terrified as well because we're going to have to be, talking to people on panels and making them look good and hopefully asking them clever questions. But we'll do our best. We do interview people all the time, don't we?
I'm quite looking forward to watching all the episodes again, and I'm looking forward to because I kind of think a bunch of thespians. We'll put them on stage, and we'll be able to get a word in edgewise.
Well, I think you're probably right.
Be off.
And that's just me. They'll be fighting me off. They'll be like, get him off. Shut him up. Anyway, so that's going to be great. And then just a reminder to people, because soon we will, of course, move on and interview our guest who is in the waiting room, I see. So just a reminder, of course, if you want to hear more of us, even than on this podcast, normally you can sign up to Patreon. And there's all sorts of perks and bonuses and great things there. And you get bonus episodes every month on top of lots of other different things. Go and have a look, check it out. And another thing that we're doing that we have mentioned before as well, but we should mention that there are tickets still available, and there's early bird tickets on sale, so special reduced price for the Historical Novel Society conference in August in Maynooth near Dublin in Ireland. I can't remember the exact price, but they are cheaper. There's a reduction of, some percentage reduction if you buy those tickets before the 15th of April, but they're selling fast. And when they're sold out, they're sold out. So if you are interested in going to that, and that's really specially geared towards historical fiction and history and writers more than anything.
And aspiring writers as well.
Aspiring writers, but there's going to be some, great novelists there and historians and people, and of course us, and some of the people we've interviewed already on this podcast. So
and last time
Basim Khan, Essie Fox, and we've got Sophie Perrineau coming up as well. They're all speakers at the event, and there's going to be lots more as well. Yeah,
and last time you interviewed Bernard Cornwell, didn't you?
Last time we went, we interviewed Bernard Cornwell and Diana Gabaldon, and it's great. It's a great opportunity to meet similar people writing in the same genre as us, and some of them, like Bernard Cornwell and Diana Gabaldon, much more successful and with a lot longer experience, a lot more experience, a lot more years under the belt. So it's great to meet these people and realize what nice people they are, really, and how it's wonderful to speak to people.
And just to reiterate, you don't have to be a published author.
No.
You just have to be interested in historical writing, and you can be a fan and come along, and it'd be a great weekend.
Absolutely. So that's another one to think about if you are looking for something to do at the last weekend of August and you're feeling flush. Have a look and check that out. Right. I think that as he is waiting in the waiting room, we should probably get him in and speak to our guest today, Edoardo Albert. What do you reckon?
I think so.
Okay, let's do it.
Edoardo Albert is a historian, novelist, and storyteller whose work ranges from the battlefields of early modern Europe to the far future of Warhammer 40,000. His latest non-fiction book, The Man Who Stopped the Sultan, uncovers the dramatic true story of Gabriele Tadino and the high-stakes siege warfare that helped shape Europe's future. Alongside his historic writing, Edoardo has penned fiction for the Black Library and created the popular 30-second histories YouTube series, distilling complex moments from the past into sharp, accessible insights. He brings scholarship, imagination, and narrative drive to everything he writes. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords, Edoardo.
Oh, thank you, Justin. Can I get you to write my blurbs in the future?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And welcome back, Edoardo, because, of course, you've been on Rock, Paper, Swords before to talk about a previous book, but it's great to have you back. And in the spirit of transparency, we're all friends with Edoardo, me, Justin, and Edoardo. Often every year or so, we meet up for a pub lunch and have a great time.
One of the social highlights, I think, of the Christmas Viking authors get together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So welcome back to the podcast. And of course, you have a new book out. So tell us about the new book, The Man Who Stopped the Sultan, Gabriele Tadino and the Defense of Europe. Tell us all about it.
Well, it's about Gabriele Tadino and the Defense of Europe, as it says in
Well done. Well, thank you very much.
There you go. So I've got it there. And there. But in 1494, it's one of the potential dates for the end of the Middle Ages, because that's when Charles VIII, the King of France, who was only young, he was 20 years at the time, short and extraordinarily ugly. He was sort of a short, crooked-legged man with a hideous face. And no one had really expected him to become King of France. He'd had lots of older brothers, but they'd all died, and he'd ended up as king. And even his courtiers thought he was a bit simple-minded. But under the sort of unprepossessing exterior, he was actually quite a crafty chap. And basically, he wanted to prove his mettle. So the French monarchy had a long-standing claim to the throne of Naples. It wasn't a very good claim, but it was one they held on to. And in 1494, the previous king of Naples died, and Charles decided he was going to stake his claim to the throne of Naples, and he decided to march to get it. Now, the problem is, of course, that Naples is in the south of Italy, and in order to get there, he either had to sail across the Mediterranean, risking storms and shipwreck, or march his army down through Italy, down the boot to get to the foot, basically. Problem with that is at that time, Italy was split into many different small states, principalities, duchies, republics. There was a whole slew of them, particularly in the north. And none of them would be keen on having the French army marching through their territory. And right through the middle of Italy, there was the swathe of the papal states. Those are the land directly controlled and administered by the Pope. And indeed, the Pope wouldn't be happy with the French army marching through. But Charles had a secret weapon. The French, towards the end of the 100 Years' War, had basically developed and mastered and perfected mobile field artillery. They'd started cast artillery in bronze, which made it much lighter. They'd invented the trunnion, those two knobbly bits that stick out of a cannon barrel, which then fit onto the gun carriage. And they'd even invented the gun carriage itself as a two-pronged wooden device which enabled easy transport for the cannon. So Charles invaded Italy and marched south. This had happened many times before. Lots and lots of people had invaded Italy, and their invasions had always sort of ground to a halt amongst the various fortifications, fortified towns, castles, because Italy had so many small states and principalities and duchies and republics. They were all heavily fortified. So in order to get anywhere, you had to blast your way through scores of these things. And it had always brought everyone to a grinding halt. But Charles, with his mobile field artillery, he just blasted through everything. Cities and castles that had stood months of siege before fell in an afternoon.
Wow.
It was, and within a couple of months, Charles was in Naples. He'd just marched right through Italy, blasting all resistance aside, and the Italians, and indeed, as it turned out, the rest of Europe were in complete shock. This is something that nobody had seen this sort of warfare before. Charles installed himself on the throne of Naples, and then wondered what on earth he was going to do with himself. Because it was one thing claiming the throne of Naples, it was another one keeping it.
So did he consolidate all these kingdoms that he went through behind, or did he just sort of smash his way through and just carry on and leave them?
Yeah, no, he just smashed his way through really and left because his claim was on Naples. The Pope, when he'd seen what Charles had done elsewhere, basically just got out of the way and let him through. And Naples, the Neapolitan kingdom, tried to resist, and he just blasted through that as well. But this is a characteristic of the wars that then happened after that. You would have great tactical successes and strategic failures because essentially one part of warfare had advanced, but others, particularly the logistics and the political aspects of it, hadn't. So Charles managed to take the kingdom of Naples, then he proved completely incapable of keeping it once he'd gone back to, he returned to France. And it fell to the Spanish, basically took it. But the problem from the Italian point of view is that this Charles's expedition had revealed two things. First off, it revealed that the Italian city-states couldn't withstand one of the great European powers like France. And secondly, it revealed to the other ones just how rich the Italian city-states were, because Italy remained the most urbanized part of Europe. Most of the largest cities, bar Paris in Europe at the time, were all in Italy, and it remained very urbanized. And the Italians had obviously at this point invented double entry bookkeeping, merchant trading, banking, even. So the Italian Italy was the richest part of Europe, and it was ripe for the plucking. But by blasting through the medieval defenses of the Italian city-states, there's a good case for saying that ended the Middle Ages, because all the old certainties of siege warfare and battles were beginning to crumble. The old high thin castle walls, a couple of blows from an iron cannonball would just bring them tumbling down. And so there's many other potential dates for the end of the Middle Ages, but 1494, in the military sense, is possibly the best one for the end of that. And then that invasion set off what's called the Italian Wars, which continued for another 65 years. On and off, and mainly on, where essentially the European powers, France, the Holy Roman Empire, Spain, essentially used Italy as their battlefield for their rivalry, and because the Italian Wars started with gunpowder, the Italian peninsula country became sort of crucible, the testing ground for these new gunpowder weapons, and those include arquebuses and muskets, and also how to defend against them. So the Italians unwittingly found themselves the center of research and development for warfare for the next more than half a century, which would be
interesting. It's a little bit like Spain and the Civil War before the Second World War became a bit of a testing ground for the Germans and the Italians.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
It's, exactly. All of that was being. I mean, it's not to say there weren't any conflicts at all elsewhere, but they were more prolonged and more bitter in Italy, and it also offered the great powers a sort of slightly neutral ground for warfare, rather than risking a sort of direct invasion of France or the Holy Roman Empire. You fought it out in Italy, where if things went wrong, it didn't directly affect you.
Thomas Cromwell was a mercenary in Italy as well, wasn't he?
I beg your pardon?
Thomas Cromwell was a mercenary in
Yes.
Italy.
I mean, and you get quite a lot of what was it? One of the I think one of the potential king of Scotland ended up in one of the. It was oh gosh, name's gone for me at the moment, but it was this. But he ended up as well on the Italian in one of the Italian battles as well, because there was money there, and most. One of the things that happened during these wars was the enlargement in the size of armies, and the necessity of states to be able to pay for them. The proportion of armies changed completely as well. So you went from roughly 50-50 cavalry and infantry to, by the end of it, it was about one cavalryman for every 6 infantrymen. It became much more infantry heavy. And it was also basically where the use of combined arms was developed and perfected. So, you have cannon, arquebus, pikes, all working together as, and obviously with cavalry as well as a combined unit, which also enabled the battlefields to overcome the Swiss pikemen, which had been the great steamroller of the previous century, were found not to be able to stand up to the sort of combined arms of this time. So that's the start of it, and because of it, a lot of Italians ended up finding they had a lot of work to do in the military. And Gabriele Tadino, who was actually the son of a family of doctors, ended up as possibly one of the most important military engineers of the time, because that was the other thing. It was you had a new breed of soldier, the military engineer, the one whose job was to make the fortifications, bring down towers, dig under fortifications, blow up mines, everything. It was a new age of sort of the beginning of scientific warfare.
And where did you hear about him, and what? Tell us about him. Which part of Italy is he from?
Well, he's from Martinengo, which is a smallish town, about 10,000 people, 15 kilometers south of Bergamo on the and that's about 30 kilometers west of Milan on the great flat plain of the River Po, which is the only flat bit of Italy there is. He was born probably in 1478, though there's a bit of doubt about exactly when he was born. And he even from childhood, he had a fascination with, he was one of those boys, if it had Lego, he would have been building castles and then knocking them down. Instead, he made them with clay and knocked them down. I think much to the despair of his father, who wanted him to be a doctor. But he managed to persuade his father in the end that he should learn these new arts of war. And he went to, his father sent him to Bergamo, a nearby town, where he began to learn his trade with a French military engineer who's not named in the sources, but that's where he was. And then in 1508, he rode away to war. But Martinengo at the time was part of a Venetian possession. Venice had conquered or taken on board parts of North Italy as its Stato di Terra, its land empire, to go with its Stato di Mare, its naval possessions, ports all the way to the Constantinople and Levant, which were vital for its trade. And so, Gabriele Tadino rode off and served with Venice in the Italian Wars. The Italian Wars were notable for the number of participants, because you've got all these different Italian states: Venice, Florence, Milan, Mantua, loads of them. The papal states, of course. and then obviously you've got the foreign combatants, the Holy Roman Empire, Spain, and France. But it's also notable for the fact that everybody changed sides all the time, and it was it was the purest example of naked political self-interest anyone had ever seen. You could imagine. You start off with Tadino involved with the War of the League of Cambrai, which is a group of states all basically ganging up on Venice, the Papal States, France, and so on. And then sort of halfway through, they some swap over and basically, stab their previous allies in the back when they think they've got what they want. But throughout that all, Tadino remained a faithful servant of Venice and went through many of the battles, the Battle of Ravenna, Battle of Agnadello, and all of these. The French did really well in many of these battles. It was, I think, really annoying for France. They kept on winning major.
Not to hear about this.
Yeah, they kept on winning major battles, but they managed to always lose the war. They could never quite figure out why that was going wrong for them. So that continuing, he was there at the various points. So, and all this time he was learning his trade.
And he was more of an engineer than a kind of rank and file soldier.
Well, he was never a rank and file soldier, but he certainly did a hell of a lot of fighting. At the Battle of one of the sieges, he was when he was still a fairly young man. He was there with one of the other. He was he was with an Italian condottiero captain. These were condottieri were the Italian mercenaries, and condottiero was the captain of the mercenary company, and the enemy, who was it in this case? It was the French, had breached the walls of the city, and they knew they were going to be attacked the following day. Tadino and his the captain crawled out at night into the breach and basically mined it with gunpowder barrels, and then waited for the enemy to attack. They'd set it with fuses, long-distance fuses, so that when the enemy started coming in through the breach, they blew it and killed 200 or 300 of the attackers. He was an engineer, but he certainly got into the thick of the fighting as well on many occasions. Suffered. In fact, looking at it is always a surprise he actually managed to live as long as he did, actually, considering the injuries he suffered along the way.
And so central to this story is the Siege of Rhodes. Rhodes is a Greek island in the far east of the Aegean Sea, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. Well, this is one of the things that makes Tadino such an interesting and fascinating character. As I said, he had been a faithful servant for Rhodes, and not for Rhodes, I beg you, for of Venice as a Venetian soldier and military engineer. And he had risen high in their service, so much so that in 1522, early 1522, he was appointed as the superintendent of the fortifications of Crete. Crete was the key Venetian possession in the Aegean Sea. It was, it was the most important colony, and to be appointed to that position was both an honor but also a chance to get extremely rich. And Tadino was sent off and was doing well there. But while he was there, an emissary from the Knights Hospitaller arrived on Crete to ask the Venetians for their help. The Knights Hospitaller, they had their base on Rhodes, and Rhodes, as you know, is actually it's only about 10 miles off the coast of what's today Turkey.
And this is a time just after the fall of Constantinople, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Literally within kind of, is it 10 years or? 15?
Oh, no, Constantinople fell in 1453, wasn't it? So,
okay.
By this point, the Ottomans had completely consolidated their control over Constantinople. They were the rising power. I mean, absolutely.
Unstoppable.
They appeared to be. And they had a new and very a new, young, energetic Sultan, Suleiman, who would come to be called the Magnificent. He had recently come to the throne in 1520, if I remember right, and he'd already conquered Belgrade. Belgrade is interesting as a choice of Suleiman's first target, because his great-grandfather, Mehmed the Conqueror, the man who had conquered Constantinople, had tried to conquer Belgrade and had failed. Suleiman, by going back and conquering it successfully, was laying down a marker that here he was, that he bore, he stood up in comparison with the conqueror. He was also the 10th Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, and a number which had a significance and power to it. And then the other thing is that Mehmed had also tried to conquer Rhodes in 1480 and failed there as well. So 2 years later, Suleiman turned to Rhodes to conquer Rhodes. I mean, for the Ottomans, the Knights Hospitaller were a bunch of pirates. The island ran across the trade routes to the Levant and the holy cities and so on, and the knights would raid their Ottoman shipping and ports and things like that. And they were a real nuisance for them. So Suleiman basically decided to finish them off. He sent a number of increasingly bellicose letters to the knights on Rhodes, and then finally demanded they either surrender or prepared to die. So the knights knew the Ottomans were coming, and they had a fairly efficient spy network, so they'd already they knew that things were up. So they were basically sending appeals for help. They called in all the men they had in their convents around Europe, but they also were sending a request to help for the kings of the princes of Europe. No help was forthcoming. Basically, at this point, Europe was the princes that we're talking about: Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, Francis I, King of France, and Henry VIII in England. They were also all young men. This is, in one sense, a story of four guys with a huge amount of testosterone who all aiming to be kings of the world. And but the European monarchs were basically too busy with their own rivalries. None of them could dare to turn their back on their own affairs to go to aid of a bunch of old crusading knights in the Far East. But the knights hoped for more from Venice. From Venice, it was for them, for the Venetians to have to continue to be able to trade with the East was vital. Otherwise, the money on which Venice was based would dry up. But the Venetians had tried to beat the Ottomans in combat in war and had failed utterly. And in the sort of hard-headed way the Venetians had, they decided, right, there's no point trying to fight them. We're aiming to remain out of this. We're not going to get involved. So when Fra Antonio Bosio, the knight's emissary, arrived on Crete asking for help, the Venetian governor absolutely refused, said, no, we're not getting involved, and you can't even recruit men. Bosio actually cheated a bit and basically pretended to recruit a load of sailors, but they were actually mercenaries. But he also learned that Gabriele Tadino was on the island as now the new superintendent of fortifications. And Tadino's reputation was such that he asked specifically if Tadino could come to lend his expertise to the defense of Rhodes. And again, the governor refused. Tadino wanted to go, but the governor said, no, we're not getting involved. But then Tadino did something extraordinary. He basically met with the Knights Hospitaller in private and said, look, I'm willing to come. The only question is we've got to sort of smuggle me off the island. So they hatched a plan where the knights pretended to leave, Gabriele Tadino, continued his normal life for a couple of days, and the governor thought all was clear. But the knights had actually basically just moored up in a bay, a couple of days, just a day sailing down the coast. And after the governor was so worried about losing Tadino, he'd had him under surveillance. But after a couple of days, he decided everything was clear and let them go. Tadino then promptly rowed out with a couple of friends and rendezvoused with the knights in the bay, and they were set off. But then disaster struck. The wind changed direction completely, and the brigantine they were in, they couldn't sail out into the wind, so they had to take shelter again in the cove. But the problem was, of course, once the day came, the governor realized that Tadino had absconded and sent out fast galleys to try and track down the knights' boat. So they dragged it up onto the shore, dismasted it, and pretended it was a boat, disguised it basically. Some of the galleys actually sailed past and asked if they'd seen a knight's brigantine going. They said no, it went that way. So they hid until the wind changed, and then they eventually managed to get off the island and sail to Rhodes. Tadino, doing this, knew that he was basically giving up everything. The power, position, and wealth that he would have as the governor, in his position on Crete, and indeed all the advantages of his years of service to Venice, because Venice essentially regarded him as a traitor.
So why did he do it? I mean, was it out of like a religious devotion to Christianity and Knights Hospitaller and all that sort of thing, or was it something else, or glory?
I think it's a romantic ideal of crusade, really. Okay. I mean, in that sense, I finished the book by saying that I regard Tadino as the last knight of Christendom, but also the first man of the modern world. And in that sense, he was. This time is when the idea of Christendom was fracturing. The national rivalries between the European powers were becoming more important than the idea of stopping the pagan or the Muslim invaders. But by the end of this period, you'd have France allying with the Ottoman Empire, and a real shock to everyone. The rivalries for the European kings were more important. The enemy of my friend is my friend, whoever he might be. So, and then, no, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, I should say.
Yeah.
So Tadino still had the old romantic ideal of crusade and Christendom, and was willing to actually give up everything in order to come to the aid of the knights. Even, as I said, meant that he lost everything. All his property on Crete and all the money he had there was confiscated. He did write a letter saying, if I fail and Rhodes falls, then it won't matter in any case, because I'll be dead. And if I succeed, then I regard what we're aiming to do as being worth the sacrifice. So he arrived on Rhodes at the end of July. The knights were delighted. They're delighted to have him. They actually recruited him into the order shortly afterwards. He became a Knights Hospitaller, which indicates he wasn't married. They clearly never married in that case, because you could only be a knight if you were unmarried. And he set about organizing the defense of Rhodes. The knights had done a great deal already at this point in terms of reconstructing the defenses of Rhodes in light of the new ways of war. So the old walls had been thickened, been lowered and thickened, hugely thickened. They'd made the moat itself had been greatly widened to make a killing zone. and they'd constructed new bastions at key points around the defenses. Essentially, what you had to do now was to make killing zones. The bastions had gun ports all along the sides, and the idea was essentially to ensure that there was nowhere on the walls that the enemy could get to without you being able to kill them. And Tadino took over directing this, but he also had another issue. The best way of bringing down the walls when they've been broadened and thickened like this, you could do it slowly with cannon, but the best way was to tunnel in under it, get right in under the wall, pack it with gunpowder and blow it up. This had proved hugely effective. You could really blow a great big hole in it in any wall if you put in enough gunpowder there. And Tadino, when he arrived, realized that he had a huge problem in Rhodes. Rhodes, it was the site of the Colossus of Rhodes. It's the Colossus it no longer stood, but Rhodes of the Knights was on the site of the old classical city. And one of the things we've discovered recently is that basically the roads of the Knights overlay the street plan and the drainage ditches and pipes and things that supplied the ancient city. So, and that many of those ditches actually ran out and tunnels ran out into past the moat to make it available to the Ottomans. So the Ottomans found that essentially there was pre-existing tunnel network going in under the city that they could go into. They essentially had highways right into the walls to lay mines, and rather than having to dig them all afresh, they were there. They just had to find them and then follow them. This obviously presented a huge problem to Dino. Yeah. I'm basically sitting on top of a honeycomb, and they can come in to any of the doors there. So he extraordinary job. He did. He dug basically. He obviously the labourers and dug a tunnel, a listening tunnel that basically followed the outlines of the walls all around the city. And then he also developed listening devices, things like one looks a bit like a tambourine, but with hinged bells on it, with the resting on these tightly strung drum, which if you held that against the wall underground, it would pick up the vibrations of the Ottoman miners, and that would tell you, where they were, give you a rough idea of direction and so on. So that was how he detected them, and then you got into the nasty, brute, dark work of wall underground, where sometimes they would try and dig in under the Ottoman miners and basically blow up the people who were going to try and blow up them. On other occasions, you'd actually get them one tunnel digging into another, and then you're on to really hard, brutal hand-to-hand fighting in a very confined space. It was not hard and nasty work, and during the court. Oh, sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I guess the title of the novel it's not a novel, it's a non-fiction book. I guess the title of the book gives away the denouement to some extent, because it says the man who stopped the Sultan. So I'm guessing that he stops the Sultan.
Well, he doesn't actually. What it is it ends up as a sort of score draw would be a bit, but then the man who drew with the Sultan we decided wouldn't work as a title.
Fair enough. Well, you still stop them if it's a draw and they can't continue. I guess so you stop them.
That's in the end what happened. For 6 months, the Ottomans besieged Rhodes. In October, Tadino was checking damage, looking through one of the window slits to that, and an arquebus ball hit him in the right eye.
Wow.
Hit him in the right eye and emerged just in front of his ear.
Ouch.
Indeed, he was out of action for 6 weeks, but he survived. I mean,
Wow.
and yeah, they were tough. These guys really were. But he was out of action. That enabled the Ottomans to push their siege closer. But the Knights had caused them such losses that the Ottomans couldn't take the town, but the Knights could no longer were running out of supplies in order to defend it. The Ottoman soldiers had suffered grievous losses in various attempts to storm the town and so on. So, and also, I mean, the Knights had probably hoped that the Ottomans would go home in the autumn. Normally, the campaigning season ended in the autumn, and everyone went back to Constantinople. But on this occasion, they didn't. I mean, Suleiman was there in person, and he wasn't going to leave until Rhodes fell. But Suleiman was faced with a problem. He was stuck in camp. It was, by all accounts, the weather was turning dreadful in November and then December. The prospect of having his army decimated by disease was rising. So both sides, in a certain sense, were looking for a way out. And in the end, Suleiman sent envoys, via third parties to say, what about a deal? And after a couple of weeks negotiation, they came to an agreement that the Knights would give up Rhodes, but Suleiman would allow them to leave with their personal weapons, with their relics, with their honor intact. He would actually provide them with ships in order to sail away, and the Rhodians themselves would be free, would have 3 years to decide whether they wanted to remain in Rhodes or whether they wanted to leave. And the Knights agreed to it. There had been some amongst the Knights who had wanted to sort of fight to the finish and so on, but in the end they decided to choose the path of live to fight another day, and they accepted the deal. And on the 1st of January 1523, the Knights sailed out of Rhodes, leaving their fort behind, and Suleiman rode into it as the new ruler of Rhodes. But Tadino, they'd actually had to smuggle Tadino out of Rhodes a couple of days earlier, because the Ottomans were always very keen on getting the best talent, and Suleiman had been inquiring about this military engineer who'd so stymied him, and they smuggled Tadino out a couple of days earlier, in case the Sultan made Tadino an offer he couldn't refuse, as it were. And so the Knights lived to fight another day. They sent Tadino as their representative to Rome to speak, to be one of the first people to get there to tell the Pope what had happened, and basically to put their case and say, we deserve, we're still standing, but we need somewhere else to a new base. But then the Pope went and died on them. So Tadino was then sent to the Emperor Charles V, whose realm by this time had expanded to include the Holy Roman Empire, Spain, the Low Countries, and of course the New World. And Tadino, he'd be a good emissary to the Charles, as give us some, because what the Knights realized is they didn't just need a base, they needed a base where they would be sovereign. What had been done over the Templars was that the King of France could destroy them, because they were dependent. They'd lost their base in the Holy Land, and he could finish them off. In Rhodes, the Knights owned Rhodes; they were sovereign there. So no one could force them to do something they didn't want to.
Hence, there are no Dan Brown novels about the Knights Hospitallers.
Exactly, because they survived. In fact, they still survive to this day as the Knights of Malta, because obviously, in the end, that's where they went. They went to Malta, where they became sovereign. Charles signed an agreement that they would have the island on payment of one falcon each year, the Maltese falcon of legend. That's where it comes from. Though it wasn't golden, it was actually a Maltese falcon.
A falcon, okay.
And that was their payment for ownership of Malta.
And which is why the Maltese cross is the same as the cross of the Knights Hospitaller. Amazing.
Because then and of course, there in Malta, they remained, and 30 years later, Suleiman had another go at defeating them at the Great Siege of Malta, and he failed, and he must have regretted not finishing the Knights off when he had a chance in 1522. But
absolutely. Gabriele Tadino obviously he's an incredibly interesting character, and you've written a whole non-fiction book biography of his life. But you mentioned last time you were on that not only obviously his story is so interesting that it would make a good novel too, and you were going to do a 2-for-1 deal and use all the research that you've done for this non-fiction book to bring out a novel as well. And I believe that is the case, and that you have a novel called The War for the Heart of the World, which is a fictional, historical fiction novel about Gabriele Tadino and all of this action. Has that already come out, or is that coming out later in the year? Have you finished it?
Yeah, it is finished, but it's going to come out later in the year. It'll come out probably in late summer now. Yeah, exactly. I thought, well, it's one of the great advantages of writing a non-fiction book is that you get the research done for a novel as well. And the novel is set purely during the Siege of Rhodes.
Right. Okay.
Because there's many other fantastic, and fascinating things that occurred during the siege. But yeah, I'm hoping also that people who read my The Man Who Stopped the Sultan will be sufficiently interested in Gabriele to want to read the novel as well.
Yeah, so that doing that work, obviously you had to go into incredible detail with the history. You've been speaking about him in this episode. You obviously know a load about his life. You've obviously really delved deep into him, into his the whole world that he inhabits and everything. How much liberty did you have to take writing the novel, deviating from fact to make it an exciting story? Because sometimes the narrative, doesn't, you can't just tell the story exactly as it was in a book, because it becomes boring. You want something to sort of drive the narrative along.
Well, in most ways, I could stick to it fairly closely, but there's been there's one key thing that I really changed. With Suleiman, I brought his concubine, Roxolana, to Rhodes to be there during the siege, because it's one of the great love stories in history. As Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, the Sultan had a harem of the most beautiful women, concubines that the Ottomans could find, slaves from all over the place. And
it's a hard life.
It was, tough. And the custom for an Ottoman Sultan was to take a concubine. But when that concubine gave birth to a son, her focus then shifted to that child, because Mehmet had also promulgated. There'd been a hideous civil war in the Ottoman Empire because the Ottoman Sultan had so many sons. There were many claimants to the throne, and it had hideous civil war. So previous Mehmet had promulgated the law of fratricide, which essentially made it legal, following the death of a sultan, for the claimants, basically his sons, to fight it out, and whoever won, to execute all his half brothers on the spot, to make sure that there was no one else as legitimate claimant to the throne. And he got religious sanction from it, from the ulama, from the Sehul Islam, the foremost Islamic jurist in the Ottoman Empire. It was all above board. It wasn't just a power play. It was actually legal and allowed. So Suleiman himself didn't have to do that, because his father had actually got rid of all his brothers and leaving only Suleiman. But Suleiman himself, he'd already had a son with a previous concubine, and as I said, the normal thing was once a concubine gave birth to a son, her focus shifted to that boy, to raising him, educating him, and basically forming the networks that will enable him when the power play came, and it was all his life was on the line. It was either become the Sultan or die. That he'd have the support in order to do that.
That's high pressure parenting.
It really, really is. Because if you fail, I mean, not only the boys there, but you're likely to follow him as well. And as I said, Suleiman had already got one son with Mahadeva, and she had gone off to taken the boy and gone off to a province. That's where they went to raise him. He would get experience as a governor and so on. But then Suleiman had a new concubine. She's known in the West as Roxolana. In the Ottoman court, she was known as Hurrem, the laughing one. She would have been a slave, we believe, from Ruthenia, the old sort of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Very little is known about her background, but Suleiman just fell completely and utterly in love with her. And when she had a son, rather than making her go away, he kept her in the court, and continued to have sexual relations with her. And in fact, together they had, I think they've six children together. And he did something extraordinary. He essentially became a monogamous Ottoman Sultan, and he married her. Again, that was something sultans never did. They didn't marry their concubines. The whole idea of the Ottoman Empire was he had the Sultan, and all his servants were his personal slaves. I mean, the janissaries, his concubines, they were all literally the slaves of the Sultan. But he actually married Roxolana. So in the novel, I have her there present on Rhodes because it's such an amazing story. So I wanted her to be there rather than just simply writing letters to Suleiman. In fact, they wrote a lot when he was away, and extremely high-flown love letters. But yeah, so that's, in terms of liberties, that's the biggest single one I've taken. I've brought Roxolana to the island to be there for the siege of Rhodes.
Mm. If you were going to recommend to readers an order to read these two in, which would you think, the factual book or the fiction?
Oh gosh, well, at the moment they can only read the factual one because the fictional one isn't out yet. I hadn't thought of that. I would. I would probably go with when it's out. Probably go with the fictional one first, as that's simply the Siege of Rhodes, and then if they're continue interested in Tadino, to learn about his background and the Italian wars, and then all that went afterwards in the non-fiction book, in my history.
Would you be tempted? I was going to say, would you be tempted to write more novels about Tadino? I mean, you've only focused on this one, couple of months or few months, 6 months, whatever period of his life. Obviously, his life sounds incredibly rich and interesting. The only thing I would think is from a novelist perspective, there's no love interest. He doesn't get married, so you'd have to throw in some love interest in there to make it a bit more rounded.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, that's one of the interesting things. I was trying to work out why he never got married, and there's nothing in the sources. I mean, I suspect that in 1508, he was already 30 years old when he went off to join the war and fight for Venice. But I wonder if he may have been married and then his wife died at that point. It's a very old age. For the time, it's an old age to go off and
Yeah, I was thinking that when you said the years, I thought, well, he's
exactly
not a young man to be running off to war.
Yeah, exactly. So and it'd been Italians like their home life and so on.
Yeah, and you can imagine the situation where if he's got a young bride and she's maybe dies in childbirth or something, and he's lost everything, and he just decides, okay, well, that's it, I'm out of here then.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's actually probably the best explanation for why he goes off at that point. And there's a sort of strongly romantic streak in him, as I said, giving up everything to go off and fight for Rhodes. There's another weird, strange episode that took place in his life during one of the pauses in the Italian wars. he got involved in a plot by some of his friends to basically kidnap a wife for one of them, and
we've all done it.
Yeah, and so they basically raid the house and ride off with this girl. And I think Tadino, to his horror, when they're riding off, finds out that the girl's actually only 10 years old.
Whoa!
So he ends up.
Okay, we haven't done that.
Yeah. So I was thinking this is very David Gemmell until this moment.
I know. I mean, he ends up in prison because of that. Though I suspect. I mean, it sounds bad, but I suspect that the kidnapping was done to put pressure on the family to agree to a marriage, but they weren't having it, and
wow.
ended up in jail for that. One of the number of occasions he ended up in jail. So
sorry, I was going to say this book is published by Osprey, who are a very well known historical publisher. How did you find working with them?
Excellent. I've really enjoyed working with them. On a purely practical authorial level, they've done the best job of publicizing the book that I've had so far. I mean, they even actually took out some advertising at the back cover of the History of War magazine for the book.
Nice.
And they've done really well in terms of getting me writing articles in places and podcasts and things like that. So and I've liked the editors I've worked with there as well. I've liked a lot. So so if anyone else is thinking of working with them, I highly recommend. I think they're an excellent organization who actually put an unusual amount of work into publicizing a book for modern publishers.
Yeah, I guess they're real experts in their field, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And mostly from bitter experience, but I have to say this was actually quite a good experience.
Yeah, well, that's really good to hear. And who's going to publish the novel?
I'm probably going to do that one independently.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've not found a publisher for it, but I think I'll go with it independently. I did suggest it to Osprey, but they said that as yet they haven't yet branched into historical fiction. Though I was hoping they'd make an exception for that, but no, I think I'll do that one independently.
Fair enough. Well, then you can only complain to yourself if the publisher doesn't do a good job publicizing.
Indeed, yeah, I know. I'll beat myself up.
You could tell us over a few drinks at Christmas. Indeed, how terrible the publisher.
You'll have to buy. Yeah, I know. You'll have to buy me a few drinks in order to slake my sorrows.
So, one thing I wanted to touch on before we go, because we've been speaking now for quite a while, is just about your 30-second histories on YouTube, which I see crop up every now and again. And I was looking today in preparation for this, and saw lots of them have got tens of thousands of views. So you must be pretty pleased with the way that's going. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that came about and the process and how you find the time to do it?
It was one of my sons who suggested it. He said, no one today's got an attention span more than 30 seconds. Why don't you do a 30-second history? So I did a trial one, and he showed it to some of his friends. And then one of his friends, a young man named Ben Foley, said, "That's really good," because the initial one was just me talking. He said, "That's really good, but I can actually edit it to make it zing, to give you pictures and make it much more fun." So I said, "Okay, give it a go." So he did, and they did all the wonderful edits and graphics and pictures in it, and makes it visually far more interesting. So that's what we do. I basically record myself speaking between 30 seconds. Sometimes I go up to about 40 or 45 seconds, but that's about maximum on a topic. Then send the tape to Ben, and he edits it, adds in all the flashy visual effects, and then we post it. And it's very fascinating. Which you get all sorts of people claiming they know what sells on YouTube. And frankly, I haven't the faintest idea. It seems to be almost completely random which one does well and which doesn't.
Which one's been most popular?
Well, also it's interesting that they vary. I mean, I put them on TikTok and YouTube, and TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And something that does really well, for instance, just yesterday, or the day before, I put one up on Charles II, England's coolest king. Did really well on TikTok, and on YouTube got 8 views. I mean, I'm not quite sure how it managed to get so few. That's whereas you get other ones where you get 20,000. It can get 20,000 views.
So, yeah, we notice not those numbers usually on our shorts that we put up. We put the last few months I've been putting shorts on YouTube, and it's so random. I can never work out why one, as you say, will get like 24 views and another one will get 1,000 or 2,000. You think, oh, what's the difference? And it just seems to be very, very random. I don't understand the process.
I mean, it will get people claiming they can tell you how the algorithm works, but as far as I can see, they've got a randomizing factor in there.
Well, I wonder if it's something as random as how many people click to see it in the first 30 seconds that it's published or something, and then because of that, it then rolls off the algorithm, picks it up and goes, oh right, it's got 5 clicks in the first 30 seconds. Therefore, we're going to now share it widely or whatever, So
I wouldn't be at all surprised, but that's in terms of its effect. I don't know how well it's done in terms of driving people to my books. I suspect as yet not very much, but we're in the business to actually get our names and books out there, and it's a way of doing it which quite become to quite enjoy, and also enables. Essentially, though, the good thing is about it in terms of the history, the topic is basically whatever I find interesting. Range from modern music history, Bob Marley, down to the oldest ghost story in the world from Egyptian times, and everything in between. Obviously, at the moment, I'm doing quite a bit about Tadino and his life and times, but so it's whatever I find interesting.
Yeah, well, it's brilliant. They're really good fun. So anyone, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this, wherever you're listening or watching this, and go and search them up. 30-second histories with Edoardo Albert. It's definitely worth a watch.
Yeah, thank you. There's some others, 30-second history and so on, but mine's the one with actual real people in it, and it's not made with AI.
Yeah, well, so you say, but only because we've met you, in real life, can we believe that you're a real person.
Well, that's true, I know, but I bought you a drink, so therefore I'm real.
It's true. We have actually seen you imbibing and eating, so you must be real.
And then staggering home afterwards.
Staggering home, yeah. Well, it's been brilliant having you on again, and I think we've been speaking for about an hour anyway, so it's probably our time is up. So best of luck with the non-fiction book, and best of luck with the fiction book again when it comes out. I'm just trying to remember the titles. You should probably know these better than me. So The Man Who Stopped the Sultan is the book that's out at the moment, and The War for the Heart of the World will be coming out sometime this summer. So best of luck with both of those. And just before you do go, after that, are you working on anything else at the moment? Have you got anything else planned?
I've got I might, yes. I mean, the next plan, I've got a book coming out in June. That's about Bede, another non-fiction book.
Oh,
Bede,
right, yeah.
Bede, the man who invented England. So that's looking at him and his importance and the whole idea of, how England came to be and the whole idea of England. And then in terms of what I'm working on at the moment, I'm doing two things. I'm going to be doing a non-fiction book probably about the birth of espionage at this time in the rivalry between the Ottomans, the Venetians, and the Habsburgs. You've essentially got the start of modern espionage. And then I'm also thinking of working on a book called The Story Isles, which would be a history of England, but in stories. Okay. So short stories, each taking rather than a narrative history, it's a narrative history in story.
Okay,
sounds great.
Well, we look forward to seeing that when that materializes then. And best of luck for all of that. You seem to be branching out more into the non-fiction, or you seem to be, non-fiction seems to be taking the fore at the moment.
Well, I mean, the Story Isles will be fiction. That's the idea, is to see if I can tell the story of England, the history of England, from certainly up until about the conquest, in actual short stories rather than in a normal narrative history. I don't think no one's ever done that before, so I'm thinking I'm going to give that one a go.
All right. Well, best of luck for that, and thanks for coming on the show again. And who knows? I'm sure in a year or two we'll get you back on again, and we'll.
Well, thank you.
Third time.
Always a pleasure to be on board as well. Thank you again, and look forward to seeing you at Christmas, if not before.
Yeah, likewise.
Great. Thank you, Edoardo.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
That was great. I do enjoy Edoardo, his books. And I mention it, but he had a fabulous book out called The Perfect Sword, which was kind of an archaeological, and it reminded me when he was talking about the kind of the background to the whole story today, is that he just brings in so much kind of relevant information. And it just gives you a context of this kind of the whole world. And with the sword, he kind of talks about, where you found steel or bog iron and all this kind of stuff, and how it would then be made into a sword. So, really, really interesting books.
Yeah, he's really, really good. And he's obviously, we first crossed paths on the internet when he wrote, he brought out his first Northumbrian Thrones at the same time that I was beginning the Bernicia Chronicles. And obviously they covered the same kings and the same period of history. And I think we were both terribly shocked when we saw each other at the same time.
They came out really close to each other, didn't they?
Yeah, and it was completely unplanned, and neither of us knew in isolation. And both of us thought, "Oh, we found our niche," and then we both saw and went, "Oh my god!" And I think he said a few choice words, and I definitely did when my agent at the time was taking the Serpent Sword around the London Book Fair, which we mentioned at the beginning. And he was taking that round trying to sell it to publishers, and it was at that London Book Fair that Edoardo's first Northumbrian Thrones novel was launched. And so I was like searching online for the London Book Fair or whatever, and I suddenly saw a big photo of a guy standing in front of a banner saying, I think the first one's Edwin. Yeah, so it's Edwin.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, Edwin, like King Edwin? I said, Northumbrian Thrones? What? I just couldn't believe it. I was thinking, are you kidding me? Because I thought I'd found a real, niche that nobody had written about.
And publishers are that kind of ridiculous. I mean, I had a rejection letter for a historical novel I did in China. And they said, we've done a book on Japan this year, so we don't need another Asian title.
Brilliant.
So, yeah. Crazy.
It is really mad, but you're right that he really knows his stuff though, and he's brilliant at bringing it to life. And obviously, you could tell we basically asked him a couple of questions, and then he speaks for a whole hour. So I did want to ask him the question of you've got these 30-second histories. I was going to say, how on earth do you manage to only speak for 30 seconds? Because if there's anyone that likes to talk about history, it's Edoardo. He can certainly go.
Yeah, and those are great actually. I mean, great production values.
Yeah, they are really good. Yeah, and I was really impressed with Edoardo that he can remember all those facts and talk for an hour about something like about the history of Gabriele Tadino and all of the different dates and all what's happening, all the geopolitics at the time. Because I just get bogged down in my own. So I know so much. I learn so much to write a book. I know so much of the history, but not much of it stays in my head. It's difficult. I feel like I almost like wipe the slate clean, and when I move on to the next novel, it's like okay, I press
reset.
Yeah, press reset and start again. It's like it's all gone. So I've got to talk. Talking in Wrexham Carnival of Words at the end of April, and they want me to talk about. Dark Frontier and the history of the American West, and they're focusing on the year 1876, which is 150 years, of course, from that year. And it was a year of great things in Wrexham, and they want to talk about what was going on in America at the time. And so they're asking me to dredge up, information that I looked at the history of America when I was writing Dark Frontier. And I was writing that in like 2023. So I'm sort of thinking, okay, I don't remember any of it. So I'm going to have to, try to remind myself what my own novel's about and what the history of America was like at the time, what was going on. So that's going to be fun. But hey, that's the joys of being a historical fiction author.
Yeah.
And in fact, if anyone's looking at the Wrexham Carnival of Words, on the final Friday of that week, which I can't remember what day it is, but the 24th of April is the first Friday, and the next Friday after that, so anyway, whatever date it is, is their historical fiction night, and all of the authors that are going to be on the panel of historical fiction authors have all been on Rock Paper Swords, and that is the sort of the thing that links them all together, and it's actually mentioned in the poster and stuff. So
fantastic,
legendary Rock Paper Swords podcast. Apparently, we are legendary in Wrexham, which is nice.
It's a small town, isn't it?
Wow, small town, but now a bigger football club than it has been for a long time.
Yeah,
they've gone up through the different leagues. They're in the Championship now, maybe Premier next year. Who knows? So that's it for today's episode, and we hope you've enjoyed it. And don't forget to leave a review and subscribe to the podcast. And thank you, of course, to all of our patrons, and a special shout out to our Patreon producers: Ben Mayer, Andy Maxwell, Ben Fox, George Johnson, and Matt Muller. And an extra special shout out to our legend patron, Adam Turner. Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you, Adam. You can sign up on Patreon to support us from as little as £1 per month. And don't forget, there are now new tiers with even more shiny and exciting rewards.
And just a reminder that actually you can sign up to Patreon for free and still see our free posts on there, and sort of, which is when we announce new episodes that are coming out and stuff like that. So if you want to go on and just sign up to Patreon for free and see what it is all about, you can sort of see, and you'll see sort of when we post things and get an idea of it. And you can always upgrade if you change your mind in the future and want to sort of move to one of the other tiers. But until next time on Rock Paper Swords, it's goodbye from me, Matthew Harffy.
And it's goodbye from me, Justin Hill.
And remember, whatever action and adventure you have going on in your life, be kind,
stay safe,
and happy reading.